Welcome back to my series where I'm ranking every single episode of every single Doctor in Doctor Who. Today we're going to be talking about the 15th Doctor's era, played by Ncuti Gatwa. Now, as of the recording of this video, the finale came out literally last week. It hasn't even been a full week to process what just happened. But I think I'm ready to talk about the era as a whole. When Ncuti was first announced, I was pretty excited because I'd seen him on Sex Education like most people have seen, and I thought he was a really great actor, and I was looking to see what his take on the Doctor would be. I thought it would be something very different and something very new, and I think he showed that. I think he does have a very different interpretation of what the Doctor is. So let's not waste any time, let's jump straight into it. First up, we have the church on Ruby Road. But let's start with some positives. I think Ncuti and Millie Gibson have a really good chemistry together, and I think you can really feel the fun that they're both having, and it feels really genuine and real, even though the story is like completely insane. I think my biggest issue with like Christmas specials sometimes is there is this emphasis where like, oh, it's Christmas, so it doesn't matter. You know, you can be like, okay, the Doctor and Ruby are going to start singing and Davina McCall is there. You know, it feels very like silly. And I'm okay with Doctor Who being silly. This is a silly program and I like that part of it. But I feel like to start off a new era of Doctor Who, I don't really feel like this one really encapsulates what they're trying to do with this Doctor. And that's something I kind of feel throughout his entire era. I don't really know who his Doctor is supposed to be. I think because I enjoyed the 60th so much, like I really enjoyed those three specials, this one just kind of felt a bit off to me. It felt like a little bit of a letdown. I was like, oh, I don't feel like this is at the same height as the previous episodes. But I didn't think it was bad, and I was looking forward to seeing where it would go. I was looking forward to seeing more of Ncuti and Millie together and to see their dynamic and see where that grows. Next up is Space Babies. This episode is fine. A lot of people hate this one, and my biggest issue is the pacing in the first like 15 minutes. Before we get onto that spaceship, it is a nightmare. I think the biggest issue is because in the original script, there was a reference to the Sugar Babe song, Push the Button. So obviously they couldn't get the rights to the music or something, so they had to like cut around it. So the scene feels really haphazard and really fast, and it doesn't feel like it flows at all. And it feels like an overload of senses, and I'm like, oh my God, slow down. Can we please breathe? But I think once we're on that spaceship, it kind of levels out and it starts to work more for me. It becomes a pretty stock standard episode of Doctor Who. I don't think it's anything incredible or anything bad. I think it's just fine. I think my biggest issue with Space Babies is that I don't think it's the most strongest, confident episode to start a new era of Doctor Who on. I think in the current age of streaming, people don't give more than one episode a go. If they don't like the first episode, they don't watch. You can blame attention span, sure, but I think it's also the way we consume media now. With streaming services, there's millions of TV shows, there's millions of movies. You're not being told what to watch like you did with terrestrial television. In the past, you'd be like, all right, this is on TV. I've only got so many options. I'll give this one another go. Whereas now, you don't have to do that. You just go to a different streaming service, or you just find a different show and try that out. Because the first episode is the most important. If you don't nail that, you may as well just give up. I'm guilty of this. You know, I watched the first couple episodes of Game of Thrones. I watched like 3 episodes and I was like, this is not for me. And everyone's like, oh, you need to get past the first season and then it gets amazing. I don't want to do that. People don't do that anymore. Whereas people used to. And that's what's changed. I think if you're choosing to start the series on something light and goofy with a title called Space Babies, I don't really think that's going to get eyes on it. Next up is The Devil's Chord. I was really excited about this episode because I love Jinx Monsoon. I think Jinx is an incredible performer. I'm a big Drag Race fan, and I thought the casting was just brilliant. And I think they do a really, really good job as playing Maestro. I really, really enjoyed their performance. I'm using they, them because Jinx is non-binary, just a heads up. And like everybody on the planet, I like the Beatles. They're great. I'm not like the biggest Beatles fan on the planet, but you know, we've all listened to the Beatles and we all like at least a handful of their songs. They're just, so the idea of Doctor Who meeting the Beatles is something like that has been discussed since all the way back in the 1960s. In the William Hartnell episode, The Chase, there's a scene where the Doctor and his friends are watching the time-space visualizer and they're listening to the Beatles do a performance. And, originally they wanted to get the Beatles to be in the episode, but their manager said no to it. Doctor Who, Beatles, two iconic moments in 60s London, putting them together just makes sense. And overall, I liked this story, but this was the beginning of my kind of annoyance at this idea of these gods, where the rules feel really flimsy and they feel like they can change at all times. And I felt like there wasn't much explanation for them. I felt like the Christian era over-explained some things sometimes. And then in this first season, I think they under-explained stuff sometimes. So you can't win with me. You can't win. What I was most confused about was the ending when everyone broke out into song and dance. And I was like, what's happening? It's like, is this something Doctor Who does now? We just break out into dance and there's no explanation for it. But there was a deleted scene where the Doctor and Ruby are running through a stairwell and the Doctor's like, oh, music is all coming back at once. Everything's going to be weird. And then that's the in-universe explanation for what just happened. And it was like 2 seconds and I'm not really sure why they cut it. And that would have made the scene work a little bit more. I think I'm a bit Doctor Who fan-brained where I'm like, how does this fit in the universe? Because I'm a sad nerd. When we changed the format of the show so much, when does it stop being Doctor Who? And when does it start being some random science fiction fantasy show that's not Doctor Who? But overall, I actually quite like this story. There's just a lot of thoughts going on about this one. Next up is Boom. I was really excited to see the return of Stephen Moffat. I'm a big Stephen Moffat defender. I've always loved his writing. He's someone that really excited me about Doctor Who and really got me into this show. So the idea of him coming back, writing under Roger Davies' showrunner guidance was something that was exciting. It felt like we're going back in time again. Everything's about nostalgia in this era. My favorite thing about this episode, though, is that it's all set in one location and there's real time for these characters to interact and get to know each other. And I think no one really understands the Doctor more than Stephen Moffat, and you can really tell how he writes this guy, and I really, really enjoy his take on the Doctor. I think this is one of Ruby's better performances as well, because she gets a little bit more to do. And yes, at times, it just feels like Stephen Moffat is writing the 12th Doctor and Clara. But I'm okay with that because I like their dynamic, so it's fine by me. I really like the idea of these people fighting a war that doesn't even exist, and, a bit of critique on AI. I think that stuff's all really fun and interesting. I think that what lowers it for me is because it goes back to Stephen Moffat's favorite thing where love saves the day. And I'm not usually a massive fan of that because I'm a cold-hearted bitch. Next up, we have 73 Yards. I'm a 73 Yards defender. I love this story. And that's the thing, I'm not really sure if it's a great Doctor Who story, but it's a great piece of horror television. It feels like Stephen Moffat had watched some of Mike Flanagan's work and thought, I can do that. It definitely feels like prestige streaming horror show, and I really enjoyed it. I think Millie Gibson does a really good job because Ncuti was still filming Sex Education, so they had to put something in. It forced Russell to write something very different. And my biggest critique at the time was that I felt like because everything that happened gets erased, we don't really actually learn anything about real Ruby. We learn something about a potential Ruby that doesn't exist. But now, after the reality war, it kind of makes you think that maybe Ruby's character, because of 73 Yards, can see different realities that may or may not have been there that even the Doctor can't see. Like Ruby remembered Poppy. So, maybe because of 73 Yards, she has gained that ability or something. I don't know, if you're trying to make this make sense, if you're trying to see something that I don't think was even written or intentional, and trying to give it meaning, if that makes you happy, then so be it. And that's what I'm doing to make myself sound like I'm being nicer about this conclusion that I did not like. But I did really enjoy 73 Yards. I liked that it made me think about it on repeat. I remember having conversations with people being like, what does it mean? What does the woman represent? Because I remember online, a lot of people were like, oh, what do you think the woman said? And I don't think the woman said anything. I think it's literally just a representation of fear and there isn't particular words that were said. I think it's instinctual. There's an instinct to be like, this is wrong, I'm running away, I can't look at this, I'm not dealing with it, I'm pushing away. And that's my interpretation of the woman, because she shouldn't exist. I think there's an explanation out there for everything. I think Russell probably does know what it all means, but I don't think we necessarily need to know what it means in order to understand that we felt something by it. You know, I felt scared. I felt something from it. It's an emotive reaction, and sometimes not everything needs to make 100% sense. To me, it's a bit like watching Twin Peaks. I keep bringing up Twin Peaks. I am a David Lynch fan, but like it's the same thing. Right? It's like it's about how it makes you feel, not necessarily what it's about. And I'm going to stop bringing up David Lynch. That's the last time. I am so sorry. But go watch Twin Peaks. Next up is Dot and Bubble. This is a curious one. In many ways, I really like it, and other ways I don't, which seemingly is this entire era. I love the concept of the setting. You know, the very obvious thing is like everyone's living in their own bubble. You know, that stuff is interesting. Obviously, this story is about racism and classism. And I think it's interesting to do this, you know, because in The Witchfinders, you had the first female doctor and, you know, she's being prejudiced against because of her gender. And in this way, we're going the same thing. You know, the doctor is being discriminated against because of his race and seeing the effects of that. And I think in this one, it's different as well because, you know, the doctor wants to help these people no matter what, because that's the doctor and they don't want his help. And there's an interesting story there to be had because the story is following Lindy Pepperbean, and she is a very unlikable person. You don't like her. There's something off throughout the entire story, but you don't necessarily pick up on it straight away. When I was first watching it, I thought it was more about classism. And I thought there was this element of, you know, all these rich white kids are living in this place and they don't want to talk to anyone outside of it. And I thought that was very clear. And then having the reveal was like, oh, actually, no, it's more about race and what that has to say. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was an interesting way of doing a Doctor Light episode as well, you know, having the Doctor just being little glimpses of it and at the end. And I think that worked. But this is the beginning of this problem with Ncuti's era where he's not even in half of his episodes. You know, this is 2 episodes this season and we've only got 8 episodes per season and he's not in 2 of them. And we have this same problem again next season where we have 1 episode where he's not really in it either. And I think these Doctor Light episodes worked in previous eras when you had 12 to 13 episodes a season. When you've only got 8 and you've only got 2 seasons of this Doctor, you really haven't got time to get to know this guy. And I feel like I don't really have a connection to his Doctor like I do others, and that sucks. You know, for myself as a queer guy, this Doctor should be for me. This should be my Doctor, you know. We have a queer Doctor that should resonate with me, but it doesn't as much as I wish it would. So that sucks. But anyway, next up, we have Rogue. I really like this episode because it's a normal episode of Doctor Who. You know, historical, aliens, a little bit of romance, fun characters, and the story just works. You know, just stock standard Doctor Who, and that's what I'm craving. I love when we have different and fun episodes of Doctor Who, but I also want the bread and butter. Sometimes bread and butter is really tasty. You know, sometimes you don't want like something fancy and unusual. Sometimes you want something basic, and this is what I want. Because pretty much most of the episodes up to now were written by Russell T Davies. It was nice to get someone new, a different voice, but it still felt like they were writing something for the first Russell T Davies era. And I think that's why I liked this episode. It felt like a stock standard episode of Doctor Who, and that's what I was wishing we were getting back with Russell T Davies, but instead we just got something completely different, which is fine, but it's not necessarily what I wanted, you know? For some reason, I've never really pictured the Doctor as someone who is like a romantic and like sexualized person. I think because the classic series, you never really got that until Paul McGann. So it just doesn't feel like a part of his character. It doesn't seem like something he'd be too interested in doing. And I believe the chemistry between the 2 characters and it works. But it does feel a bit fan fiction-y when the Doctor gets romantic. I don't know why, but for me, it always feels like a fan is writing it. And it's like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if the Doctor kissed? You know, it doesn't feel like Doctor Who sometimes to me. I don't know. It's just not the show it was set up. But the thing is, this show has to change. It has to evolve. It has to move and do different things. And I think if Ncuti stayed for more seasons, we would have seen Rogue return more than that quick little cameo, and something would have happened. And maybe there was more story to tell, but we're never going to see that now. And that's disappointing. I'm going to talk about that more in depth later on when we're talking about things that were set up and have paid off, when we talk about the finale. But for now, let's move on. Next up is The Legend of Ruby Sunday. This episode is just fine. It sets up a lot of stuff for the finale, which I'm not a big fan of. But, in this one, it's nice to see Mel back. The reveal of Sutek is hilarious. And I feel like I should say more because this era is so short. But I really have nothing. I have nothing to say. Next up is Empire of Death, and this one, unfortunately, is not for me. I didn't set up this YouTube channel to come on here and complain about Doctor Who. I don't like coming on here and saying, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like this, I don't like that. I think that's really awful. I set up this channel so I could talk about a show that I loved with people who also loved it. That's what this is about. And this is really depressing. And I hate that I'm looking at this list already and I've put nothing in best. That's awful. And the worst thing is I feel like I'm being generous. This era really promised something that I was really looking forward to and we just didn't get it. And it's really, really sad. I hate that I can't say nice things about this episode. Throughout the season, we've set up that Ruby can somehow make things snow out of nowhere, that she has these abilities and, you have Maestro saying there's something wrong with this person, they're not normal. And then to go and say, actually, she's just like everyone else. Or we've set up that Ruby's mother is pointing at something and then we're told, oh, that whole time she was pointing at a sign. Didn't you notice that? Well, of course we didn't notice it because it wasn't in Church of Ruby Road. It feels like they're setting up these mysteries. They want you to invest in it and they go nowhere. And then it makes you feel like you're stupid. It's like, oh, you didn't notice that? Are you dumb? And it just feels so insulting. And I feel like I'm being dramatic. I feel like this is such an overreaction to this. But I was hoping that everything that happened here was of some weird production reason. The reason why this didn't work out was because something behind the scenes fell apart. Because if this was intentional, it feels like Russell was making it up as he goes. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with making it up as you go along, as long as it makes sense in the end. I don't believe the original intention was that Ruby's biological mother was just some random person. I don't believe that. Because why does it snow? Why does she have those powers? Why is Maestro a god, a physical god who knows more about everyone than everybody else? Why does Ruby play a song? I'm sorry, but if you sonicked me or whatever, I don't just start singing. I could. You don't want to hear it because I can't sing. But, it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. And it just kind of falls flat. And we're not even talking about the return of Sutek being disappointing. This was just a really low point to end this season on. And I was hoping that it was growing pains. And then next season, it's even worse. So, if you're someone who's like, this is too depressing, I don't blame you if you quit this video by now because this sucks. But I promise some of these episodes are going to go up next season. I really like next season, kind of. I think I might pause for a second and come back because I feel like this is not the vibe that you guys signed up for. And I'm sorry. I feel like I'm failing you, Next up is Joy to the World. I actually really liked this one. I thought it was really, really fun. I was really worried at first because it had a lot of elements going on and I was like, oh no, we're going to be jumping around time and space and it's going to be a nightmare. But it actually was paced quite well, in my opinion. I like the idea of this hotel where, you can open the door and you can go different places and stuff like that. My favorite part of this story though, is where the Doctor is stranded on Earth and he's with Anita and there is this real connection between the two of them. And just sitting with that for like a big chunk of the episode and just seeing them getting to know each other, the Doctor getting over the fact that he's stuck there, Anita kind of falling in love with her a bit and then realizing that that's not an option and still loving their friendship. It felt so real and genuine and heartfelt. And that's really what I wanted more from this era. And I think that's the beauty of a longer run time. At these Christmas specials, you can do stuff like this. You have time to tell these smaller stories because the smaller stories have way more heart. I know there was a lot of people feeling a bit awkward about the COVID storyline, about Joy's mother in hospital and she dies alone. And it really moved me because it was such an awful time for everyone. But it was very specifically about, these politicians are making it so you can't go there, but for them, the rules don't count. And that's what the message was about and how sad that is. And it was trying to give a nicer ending to it by letting her have that moment with her mother. And yeah, I cried like a baby. That really resonated with me. But I can also understand why some people, who did lose people in COVID and how they felt like it was just like a step too far. It was too raw, it was too much, and I totally get that. So I think there is room for a lot of interpretations about when we're talking about real life things like COVID and pandemics and how that actually affects people. Is it too soon to tell those stories? Are people ready to really reflect on that, or are the wounds still too fresh? But I think the perfect Christmas special, if we're looking for like really Christmassy stuff, it's fun, it's funny, and it's heartwarming. And I think Stephen Moffat knows how to do heartwarming at Christmas really, really well. So I think if that's what you're looking for this Christmas, you got it. And I did like this episode quite a lot. Next up, we have the Robot Revolution. This episode was a bit of a rough start to the season, purely down to pacing being the main issue for me. It moved at an electric pace yet again, and I was like, oh God, am I really ready to go through a whole season of this? But thankfully, this was an outlier in this season. The pacing is a lot better as it goes on. And I really liked Belinda. Well, I liked the promise of Belinda. I liked Belinda in these first few episodes of this season, where she was this person who was like, I don't like that you're testing me without my permission. I don't like that you've kidnapped me and you're not taking me home. She was someone who was a bit unwilling to travel with the Doctor and critical of the Doctor and what he does and what he represents and how he thinks he can just do anything to anyone. That disappears as the season goes on. By the Interstellar Song contest, the Doctor is beating the hell out of someone and then she's saying, I think you're amazing, Doctor. Like, what? Like, are you going through like Stockholm Syndrome? We're not even going to talk about the finale yet. We'll get to that. But, I liked this version of Belinda. I liked her. I liked what she was about, and I was hoping we'd get more of that. And maybe that was the original intention. Then production issues changed it. I don't know. But this person that we met, we don't see her very often after this. Next up, we have Lux. I'm going to put this as the best because this is my favorite God story that we get. I think the story just works. I think the conclusion's a little bit up in the air, but beggars can't be choosers, babe. Beggars can't be choosers. I'm going to be kind to this one because I do really like this one. I'm a film nerd, so if anything, any piece of media is about the creation of film, about cinemas, baby, I'm going to like it. That's me. What I like about the story is I like all the side characters. They feel simple, but well written. I feel like I really sympathize with the projectionist, the loss of his wife, and what Lux is offering him by getting to see his wife again. That's beautiful. Where the Doctor and Belinda become 2D characters and it's all very Scooby-Doo, and I love all that stuff and how they become into the picture. What does that mean? And when they meet the fans, what does that mean on a bigger scale? Does it mean anything? Because, what does anything mean anymore? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And that's the problem as well, because as the making of this video, we don't know what the future of Doctor Who looks like. We don't know if it's still going. And so I feel like we're never going to have an answer for that. And that's fine. Whatever. But I actually felt like that scene, I felt like it was kind to fandom. I think it was actually really, really sweet, where, it was talking about the sense of community that being a fan of this show can do. I have some really amazing friends in person and online that I've made through Doctor Who. And if it wasn't for this show, I never would have met these people. And my life would be completely different without them. So, and that's what that was trying to comment on. And I really enjoyed that. And I thought it was kind. So yeah, is this episode perfect? No, but I need to put something in the best because we're getting to the end of this era, babe. We're running out of time. I need to be kind about something. But I do love this episode, and this is an episode that I will happily rewatch multiple times. Next up, we have The Well. I'm also going to put this up quite high as well because I felt like it did a really good job at being a sequel to Midnight without doing the exact same thing again. Did it need to be a sequel to Midnight? No. But I do believe it added a little bit more of emotional weight for that moment where the Doctor approaches and he realizes that it's the same creature. When he cries in that moment, it felt earned, it felt important, and it felt like it added more stakes compared to some other moments where Ncuti cries and I feel like it's forced. This felt real. It felt like the Doctor was actually really scared. And I think that's why it worked for me as well, because once the Doctor's scared, the audience is also scared. Because usually the Doctor's like, oh, I can beat anything. I'm Doctor Who and I can do whatever. And when there's those moments where the Doctor is out of control, where the monster is too terrifying, that's when it gets scary. I love the character of Alice Fenley. I think it's really well performed. And I think it's really spooky. I think she does a brilliant job. And I really love this one. Next up, we have Lucky Day. I also really enjoyed this one. You know, at this point in the series, I was like, we're back, baby. We're back. Doctor Who is really good. And I need to learn to shut up. Stop saying it, Josh. Stop saying that. I have never been a massive fan of Ruby Sunday. I think she's okay, and I think Millie does a great job with it. But I think this episode, I was like, oh, I get it. I get why people love her. And I really thought she did a brilliant job. I love getting to meet Conrad, and you think he's this shy and awkward guy who's really sweet. And then that twist. I was a bit shocked. I was taken aback by it. I was shocked. I didn't see it coming. And I think he did a great job at being evil and nice at the same time. I like that it was playing into this idea of creating conspiracy theories out of nothing and the power these movements can have and how they can have real life effects. I think my biggest issue with this story is there's no real critique of UNIT as this army that seemingly has endless amounts of power. And I think there's room for criticism in that, but maybe this story isn't really about that. And that's the type of writer Pete McTighe is. You know, he will focus on one core theme without really critiquing the other bit as well. I feel like his focus is sometimes locked on one thing. And I think that's fine because Conrad is such a detailed and fleshed out character that devoting time trying to understand him works for me. Next up, we have the story and the engine. This story at first, I wasn't a massive fan of. There were parts I really liked. I loved the first 5 minutes and the second half. But there was like a 10 to 15 minute block where it felt like a stage play. And it was just a really long scene with too many characters and I couldn't keep up to what was going on. And I found it a bit boring. And I tuned out on first broadcast, and I haven't done that for a very long time during the Chris Chibnall era because I struggle with scenes where there's like 10 people in it. And the person who wrote this story is someone who writes plays, and you can tell. You can tell they're a stage writer, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know, and I think it's still a really great story. It has a lot of great themes in it. I like, you know, the Doctor being in a space where he feels comfortable to be himself. It's a different story that we haven't seen before. And I love the idea of the Doctor being human. You know, the Doctor is, of course, from Gallifrey, but he has ties to this planet. This is his home as much as Gallifrey is, if not more so. You know, he hasn't been to Gallifrey for a very long time. He ran away because he didn't agree with it, but he chose Earth. And in this very specific scenario, he's choosing a place that is referencing his identity and who he is in this incarnation, and there's real power to that. And I like that we're exploring that. So there's so many things in this story that I love, but there is that 10-minute area where I'm like, I don't know, this feels a bit messy. What's going on? It was great to see Jo Martin back, but once again, she's regulated to a cameo. I'm sick of it. Give us something to do. Give us something real. Give us something big. And it's also got a bit muddy as well. It's like, oh, does the current Doctor remember being Joe Martin now? It feels sometimes like Russell like skimmed over a TARDIS wiki entry rather than watched the things that he's bringing back. And, that's relevant to the Rani later on as well. It feels like, oh, I kind of know what that's about. Oh, it's I got the gist of it. I can turn it into something else. That's kind of what it feels like in this moment. But yeah, people loved this story. It was like, everyone's like, best of the best Doctor Who story ever, best 15th Doctor story ever. And I can see it, but it's not necessarily up the top of the top for me. Next up is the Interstellar Song contest. I love the setting. I love the overall vibe. Originally, I really liked the return of Susan, but I think its politics are very muddled. I think this episode has a similar problem that Kablam had, where the critique is aimed at an individual rather than the bigger oppressor. And it's odd for Doctor Who, because Doctor Who is very much the oppressed versus the oppressor, and the Doctor is always on the side of the oppressed. Because what this story is saying, it's not saying, oh, they're fighting for liberation. They're fighting for vengeance. They're angry, they want revenge, and they want to take it out on everyone. And that's the message they're trying to say. Because it should be a story where the Doctor sees these people who are taking these violent actions in order to fight back the corporation and say, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you get justice for what happened to you because it was wrong. But instead, the Doctor wants to punish this person, and it's really odd. And ultimately what it's saying is that the only form of resistance that this writer is comfortable with is if you sing a little song about it, you sing a little song and then everything gets fixed. They're trying to tell different perspectives on fighting back on this, but they haven't really focused on what they're trying to say. I really don't know what the takeaway of the story is supposed to be. And that's dangerous, because I think it's important that we're critiquing the oppressors. Because if we're just saying, oh, you know what, all these people who are fighting back, all they're doing it is out of vengeance, they just want to attack, that's wrong. And then to say that, oh, you just have to sing a little song and everything gets better, that's also really minimizing. Because we all know this is commentating on real life politics and Eurovision. For those who don't know, Eurovision has allowed Israel to compete, even though Eurovision blocked Russia from competing. Why is there a double standard? I, alongside those who support Palestine, have been boycotting Eurovision for the past 2 years for this exact reason. What are they trying to say? At a moment like this, where people are dying, where people are being taken out of their own homes, to be murky with our politics is a disservice. It's just not good enough. If we're going to make a show where Doctor Who is political and we're commenting on politics and real life things, be succinct. Know what you want to say and say it. I'm going to take a break. Girl, I'm fuming. All right, I need a little bit of a break after talking about the Interstellar Song contest. Wow, today has been like emotions high. I think this is too fresh to be talking about this era. But, baby, I got to generate content like a good little boy, like Russell T Davies wants me to do, okay? I'm generating content. All right, let's talk about Wishworld. Next up is Wishworld and The Reality War. I'm going to talk about both of these because it's just one big story and it's all just not for me, babes. And it's a nightmare. Let's start off with the Rani. Mrs. Flood's the Rani. Doesn't make any sense. No, but it doesn't matter. Why was she Ruby and Belinda's neighbours? Who cares? Doesn't matter. It's just Doctor Who, isn't it? Or why was she breaking the fourth wall? Oh, that doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. She's bi-generated. There's two of them. I like that dynamic, actually. I like that we have like head Rani in charge and then Mrs. Flood as her like little Igor. And I think that's funny. I think in Wishworld, I was not sold on the new Rani. But in the Reality War, I was. I think once we've discovered that it was an experiment, it feels somewhat like a Rani plan, kind of. But to bring Omega back, as soon as they said Omega, like it was literally the biggest eye roll of my entire life. It's like, all right, so what? What's happening? Susan's back. Not only is the Rani back, but there's two of them. Omega's back. It's like, how many things do we need in one story? Not to mention that we have Kate back. We've got all of Unit back. We've got Mel there. We've got all these characters, and Conrad's there. And there's a baby. And when you kiss the baby, you can do a wish. What is this show? What has it become? I don't know what this genre of television is, but I don't want it. I'm not interested in it. It's not for me. Let's say, for example, with Omega. We're like, oh, Omega's back, but he doesn't look like Omega. He doesn't act like Omega. Then why is he Omega? Why couldn't he just be a creation from the underworld or something? And maybe that's what it is. Maybe this is a Wish version of Omega. God. I do like the Rani on her little like flying scooter thing. That was cute. That was fun. And then again, we lose the Rani pretty much not even halfway through the second episode. She gets eaten by Omega. And it's like, we just met her. So the reveal feels empty and nothing. And then Mrs. Flood teleports away. And then we destroy Omega. And it's like, what was the point? What was the point of bringing these characters back if you're not really going to use them? It just feels like it's there to generate content. It's to say, it's for an article to be like, the Rani is back. Omega is back. What does that mean? Watch the 3 Doctors to fully understand who Omega is before the new finale. And I even fell for it. You know, I made a YouTube video about Susan coming back. I generated content. I did what they wanted me to do. And it was for nothing. Susan didn't do anything. And maybe that's because there were obvious reshoots. And maybe in the original ending for this episode, Susan came back. Maybe she was going to be in a Christmas special with Ncuti, with the Daleks or something. I don't know. And it would have been marvelous, absolutely marvelous. But that didn't happen. So it feels pointless. I just feel like there's so much set up in this season, in this era, that doesn't get paid off. And Ncuti didn't want to wait to see if Disney were going to renew again. That's a lot of time to sit around and wait for your next gig. You're turning down other offers as your star power is rising. I don't blame him for leaving, but it did leave this show in the lurch. And I don't blame him. I think Russell had a lot of faith in what he was creating and thinking that it was going to be a paramount success and that Disney were going to renew. You know, he said from day one, it's going to be no more gap years, Doctor Who every year. And then he changed his script and said, oh no, it was always going to be renewed at the end of season 2 to see if there was going to be another season. And you're like, well, if that's the case, there would have been a gap year. The math ain't mathin'. I don't like liars. Somebody's lying. I watched The Reality War with a few friends and it was like the most uncomfortable experience of my life. Not because of them, I love those guys, but it was like, Anita rocks up, and you're like, okay. And it was just like bombarding from beginning to end. I think the biggest tragedy is the ending. You have Belinda, who is this character who made it very specific about, I want to go home. I don't like that you think you could just scan me. What was all the Mundy Flynn thing that was set up in Boom? That didn't go anywhere. It feels like a reshoot because there were so many elements and it's so disappointing. And then we end up that Belinda gets her whole character rewritten and now she's a mother to Poppy. And that's just not the person that we met. I don't know who she is. And it feels wrong. The Doctor changed her life without her permission and put her in this scenario that she wasn't meant to live. And there's no commentary on that within the show. And it's just really grim. It's not a nice ending for her. But it was great to see Jodie Whittaker back. That was really nice to see that little scene with her. And I think they had a really great dynamic together. The most egregious part is the regeneration, where Ncuti regenerates into Billie Piper. I love Billie Piper. I think she's an incredible actor. And I think she'd be a great Doctor. But after we've had the Rani return, it went nowhere. Omega return, went nowhere. Susan return, it went nowhere. It feels like, all right, I guess Billie Piper is the Doctor, and I have no faith in it. Ruby's storyline got set up, didn't get paid off. It feels like a last-ditch effort to get any sort of interest. for someone to generate content, to generate hype, that Disney looks around and is like, oh, people are excited about Billie Piper being the Doctor. Maybe we'll give them some money to make their silly little show. It feels desperate. And at this point, I feel insulted by it because I have no faith that any of these things go anywhere. Because, they haven't even said that Billie Piper is the next Doctor yet. They just said, Billie Piper's here. What does it mean? Who is she? What does it all mean? Will we get answers? Who cares? Because as we've shown, it looks like half the time that Russell hasn't even got answers. He just sets up a mystery box and just leaves it. And then he just comes up with something. It's like, oh, Mrs. Flood will be the Rani. Wouldn't that be marvelous? Everyone wants the Rani to return. But it doesn't make any sense why she's the Rani. Mrs. Flood is nothing like the Rani at all. This is a really disappointing end to Ncuti Gatwa's era in Doctor Who. An era that was far too short, where I feel like I don't really know who his Doctor is, where there are so many mysteries set up and they either don't get paid off or they end up falling flat, in my opinion. I think there were big, substantial changes to what this show was. Doctor Who now falls into fantasy more than science fiction. We have gods, where they have endless powers, where the rules have changed. And I feel like that should be exciting, that we're going to tell different stories after so many years. But I don't know if the experiment really resonated with me. When I look at this tier list, I don't even know if I believe it. I feel like I'm trying to be more generous than how I actually feel. I think there's a lot of good individual episodes in this era. I have a lot in the great category, but the era as a whole, how it was showrun, with an emphasis on marketing over characters, an emphasis on setting up mysteries without caring about them. It feels like, is there problems behind the scenes? Is that why this ended the way it did? Because something is off. Something is not right. This doesn't feel like the Russell T Davies that we knew of the past, or really of the near present. If we're talking about stuff like Years and Years, we're talking about It's a Sin. Two really brilliant, incredible pieces of television. Where did that guy go? I believe that television and film is a miracle. You are relying on so many different elements coming together and working. It is hard. Did something go wrong? What went wrong? Why is it like this? I think this iteration of Doctor Who is something that I happily tune into, and I have fun with it a lot of the time, but it's not the show that I fell in love with anymore. And that's okay. It's not because I hate it and I want to see the downfall of Doctor Who. I never want that. I would rather Doctor Who have good episodes every now and then than have no episodes at all. I'm not someone who's on the let's cancel Doctor Who brigade. I'm not that girl. I've never been that girl and I will not be that girl. But I am disappointed. And I'm sorry that this series and this video is ending on such a sour note. And who knows? If Billie Piper is the next Doctor, that could be the greatest season of Doctor Who of all time. Who knows? Well, thank you so much for sticking around for this super long series where I've talked about every single episode of Doctor Who. It's so nice that you guys have had such a positive response to this series. And I love seeing you guys being like, Josh, you're insane. That's a brilliant episode. You're stupid. It's so funny. And I love that there's differing opinions to Doctor Who. And I think that's what makes being involved with Doctor Who fandom, having this YouTube channel, that's what makes it fun. I'm not here to say I'm right. These are just how I feel about the episodes in the moment. None of this is scripted. This is off the cuff with all of my endless knowledge about this show. And I'm so happy that I get to have this conversation with you. And thank you so much for sticking around. It's crazy. Thank you so much. Okay. Oh boy. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Josh Snares YouTube channel.